On the morning of his 18th birthday, Lucas Miller stood quietly at the front gate of Riverside Youth Home, with a worn duffel bag slung over his shoulder. The metal fence rattled softly in the cold wind, as if reminding him that this place, his only home for most of his life, was now behind him. No cake, no party, no family, waiting, just freedom and uncertainty. A social worker handed him a thin vellum before he left. Inside was a legal document confirming that he had inherited his grandfather's property, a massive auto scrapyard on the outskirts of Black Ridge, a dying industrial town in the Rust Belt. Rows of abandoned cars, twisted steel, rusted machines, a junkyard. That was all his grandfather had left him, or so it seemed. Lucas boarded an old Greyhound bus and took a window seat. As the city faded into endless highways and empty factories, he stared at his reflection in the glass. 18 years old, no savings, no degree, no safety net, just a name on a piece of paper and a place he'd never seen. 2 hours later, he was approached by Victor Hale. The man wore a tailored suit that didn't belong on dusty sidewalks. He introduced himself as a legal representative of Titan Dynamics Corporation, a major engineering conglomerate with interests in the region. Victor smiled like a salesman who already knew he had won. "I'll be honest with you, kid," he said smoothly. "That property isn't worth much. Environmental risks, old equipment, climate costs. But we're willing to take it off your hands." He slid a check across the cafe table. $5,000. To Lucas, it looked like a fortune. That money could pay for rent, food, community college, a fresh start. For a moment he almost reached for it. Anger rose in his chest. Was this really his grandfather's legacy? A pile of scrap metal and disappointment. But something stopped him. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the quiet voice inside him that whispered. "Go see it first." Lucas pushed the check back. "I'll think about it," he said. Victor's smile faded. With greasy keys in his pocket and doubt in his heart, Lucas boarded another bus toward Black Ridge, unaware that he was traveling not toward a junkyard, but toward the truth about who he really was. The bus dropped Lucas off at a cracked concrete platform beside an abandoned warehouse. A faded sign above it read, "Black Ridge Transit." Half the letters were missing. "Welcome to town." The air smelled like oil, dust, and old rain. Across the street, boarded-up diners and empty storefronts lined the road like broken teeth. Once this place had been alive, now it felt like time had given up on it. Lucas adjusted his duffel bag and followed the directions on his phone until the signal disappeared. That's when he saw it. The scrapyard stretched for acres beyond a sagging chain-link fence. Mountains of crushed cars rose like metallic hills. Bent doors, shattered windshields, rusted engines, everything stacked in chaotic silence under a gray, Midwestern sky. This was his inheritance. He stood there for a long time, unable to move. "So this is it," he muttered. Inside the gate, weeds pushed through cracked asphalt. Old license plates clung to fences like forgotten memories. Wind whistled through hollow frames, creating low, haunting sounds that reminded him of distant voices. Lucas wandered deeper. Each step felt heavier than the last. Growing up in foster homes, he had learned how it felt to be temporary, replaceable, easy to forget. These cars looked the same. Once loved, once useful, now abandoned. He kicked a loose bolt across the ground and watched it disappear into the shadows. Night came fast, clouds swallowed the last light, and the scrapyard turned into a maze of dark shapes and sharp edges. Lucas pulled his jacket tighter and considered leaving. Maybe Victor had been right. Maybe this place really was worthless. Then he noticed something strange. The shipping containers. At first glance, they looked randomly scattered. But as he climbed onto an old pickup truck and looked around, a pattern emerged. The containers weren't messy. They were arranged deliberately, forming narrow corridors, blocking sight lines from the road, creating blind spots. Someone had designed this. His heartbeat quickened. Lucas followed faint chalk marks on the ground, half-raised arrows, and numbers hidden beneath oil stains. They led him past stacked engines and broken cranes toward the far edge of the yard. There, behind a wall of crushed sedians, stood a steel door embedded into the earth. It didn't belong. It was clean, solid, unrusted. A keypad glowed faintly beside it, modern, digital, alive, in a graveyard of dead machines. Lucas stared at it, breath caught in his throat. "What is this?" he whispered. The junkyard wasn't just a junkyard. It was hiding something, and whatever lay beneath it had been waiting for him. Lucas stood frozen in front of the steel door. The keypad blinked, softly in the darkness, waiting. For several seconds, he just listened. The wind rattled loose metal behind him. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed through Black Ridge. Everything sounded old, broken, except this door. It was new, alive, protected. His hands trembled as he reached into his pocket and pulled out the greasy key ring his social worker had given him. Half a dozen rusted keys, one small plastic tag with faded numbers written in marker, RM0423, April 23rd. His grandfather's birthday. Lucas swallowed. He typed the numbers into the keypad. The screen flashed green with a low mechanical hum. The locks disengaged. The door slid open. Warm light spilled out. He stepped inside and stopped breathing. The underground sham. Burr was nothing like he expected. Instead of darkness and dirt, he found polished floors, organized workstations, and rows of advanced tools mounted neatly on steel walls. Computer monitors glowed quietly. Blueprints covered an entire glass panel. Complex equations, energy diagrams, and mechanical schematics filled every inch. In the center stood a machine, sleek, silver, untouched by rust. It looked like something from a research lab, not a scrapyard. Lucas walked toward it, slowly, afraid it might disappear if he moved too fast. "Grandpa, what is this?" he whispered. On a nearby workbench lay a yellowed envelope stained with oil and fingerprints. His name was written on it in shaky handwriting. Lucas. He picked it up. Inside was a letter. "My boy, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and you were brave enough to come looking. This scrapyard was never meant to be your burden. It was my shield, my disguise. For 20 years I worked on a clean energy engine that could change everything. No pollution, no corporate control, true independence. They tried to buy it. When I refused, they started watching me. That's why I let you go. Not because I didn't love you, because I loved you too much. I couldn't let them use you to get to me. Every birthday I missed, every letter I never sent, it broke me. Forgive me. You were always my greatest invention." Grandpa Robert, Lucas's vision blurred. The words hit harder than any punch. All those years of wondering why he had been abandoned, all those nights, believing he wasn't wanted, they weren't true. He sank onto a stool, clutching the letter, tears dripping onto the stained paper. "I waited for you," he whispered, "all my life, in the silence of the underground lab, surrounded by humming machines and unfinished dreams." Lucas finally understood. He had never been forgotten. He had been protected, and now the truth was in his hands. Lou. Kaz didn't leave the underground lab that night. He sat there until dawn, rereading his grandfather's letter, studying the blueprints, tracing every line with shaking fingers. Somewhere, between the humming machines and the quiet glow of the monitors, something inside him shifted. Grief turned into resolve. Fear turned into purpose. By morning, he had made a decision. He wasn't selling. Not the land, not the lab, not the dream. 2 days later, Victor Hale returned. This time he didn't bother with coffee shops. A black luxury SUV rolled up to the scrapyard gate, tires crunching over gravel. Victor stepped out in polished shoes and a sharp grey suit, looking wildly out of place among rusted cars and weeds. You've had time to think, Victor said, flashing his practiced smile. Let's be reasonable. He handed Lucas a new $20,000. Final offer, Victor added. Take it and walk away. Lucas didn't even open it. He handed it back. No deal. Victor's smile cracked. You have no idea what you're up against, kid. He warned. This place will swallow you. Maybe, Lucas replied calmly. But it's mine. Victor's eyes hardened. This isn't over. The SUV drove away in a cloud of dust. Lucas watched it disappear. Then he got to work. He used the emergency fund his grandfather had hidden in an offshore account to repair the fence, install cameras, and secure the underground entrance. He cleaned years of debris from the yard, marking safe paths and rebuilding collapsed structures. But he couldn't do it alone, so he went into town. He visited old machine shops, closed factories, and union halls that had been silent for years. He talked to men and women who had once built engines, turbines, and heavy equipment, people Titan Dynamics had laid off and forgotten. Help me protect something that matters, he told them. Help me build something new. They listened. Frank Donovan was the first to say yes, then Mike Carter, then Ethan Brooks. Soon the scrapyard wasn't quiet anymore. Welders sparked in the dark. Generators hummed, hammers rang against steel. Laughter returned to broken buildings. At night, Lucas studied engineering, manuals, and online courses. By day, he worked beside the crew, hands blistered and clothes soaked with sweat and grease. He wasn't pretending to be a boss. He was becoming one. Sometimes doubt crept in. What if he failed? What if Victor was right? On those nights, Lucas reread the letter. You were always my greatest invention. And he stood back up. The scrapyard was no longer a graveyard. It was a fortress and a promise. The night the prototype finally powered on, the entire scrapyard held its breath. Frank stood by the control panel. Mike monitored the pressure gauges. Ethan double-checked the cooling system. Lucas stood in the center of the underground lab, heart pounding, hands steady, but determined, ready. Frank asked. Lucas nodded. To it, the engine hummed. Not violently, not chaotically. Smooth, clean, controlled. A low, powerful vibration filled the room. Not the angry roar of fossil fuel, combustion, but something different. The monitors confirmed it. Zero emissions, beyond projected limits. Stable output, sustainable conversion. It worked. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mike let out a stunned laugh. Ethan whooped. Frank wiped his eyes and muttered, Your granddad would be proud. Word spread. Fast. When Titan Dynamics attempted to challenge Lucas legally, claiming intellectual ownership, they were met with documented patents, encrypted research logs, and time-stamped designs Robert Miller had secured years earlier. The case collapsed before it could gain traction. For the first time in decades, Blackidge had something no corporation could buy. Hope. Within a year, the scrapyard transformed into Mill Air Energy Systems, a small but ambitious clean tech startup. Former factory workers had jobs again. Local diners reopened. The transit sign got fixed, and on a cool fall morning, Lucas stood outside the renovated facility, watching employees walk through the gates that once symbolized decay. This place used to be a graveyard of broken machines. Now it was a birthplace. He looked up at the sky and whispered, We did it, Grandpa. But here's the real question. What would you have done at 18 with nothing but a rusty key and a choice? Would you have taken the money, or would you have chased the unknown? If this story inspired you, moved you, or made you think differently about legacy and second chances, subscribe to the channel and join us for more stories about resilience, purpose, and building something that lasts. Because sometimes the greatest treasure isn't what you inherit, it's what you decide to build.